Jimi Hendrix shed tears when he saw a picture of his mother on stage. The ghost of Lucille. The rain fell heavy on Seattle in the autumn of 1958, the kind of relentless Pacific Northwest rain that seemed to seep into your bones and settle there permanently. In a modest house on the outskirts of the city, a 9-year-old boy named Johnny Allen Hendrix sat by the window, watching the water cascade down the glass. He was waiting for his mother to come home, though he had begun to suspect that she would not be coming home anymore. Lucille Hendrix had been a presence in Johnny's life, but not always a stable one. She was a woman caught between worlds, a talented musician and dancer who had dreams of stardom, but who had been constrained by the limitations of her time, her race, and her circumstances. She was beautiful, with a grace that seemed to transcend the poverty and struggle that surrounded her. But she was also troubled, battling demons that Johnny was too young to fully understand. Johnny's father, Al Hendrix, had done his best to shield his son from the chaos that often erupted in their household. Al was a hard-working man, a veteran who had returned from World War II with his own set of scars, both visible and invisible. He loved his wife, but he could not save her. No amount of love could overcome the forces that were pulling Lucille down. The addiction, the depression, the sense that life had dealt her an unfair hand. On September 2, 1958, Lucille Hendrix died. She was only 34 years old. The official cause was listed as complications from cirrhosis of the liver, but the real cause was far more complex. It was poverty, racism, heartbreak, and the slow erosion of hope that comes from living in a world that does not value you. Johnny did not fully understand what had happened. All he knew was that his mother was gone, and that she was never coming back. In the years that followed, Johnny would construct a mythology around his mother. He would remember her as a beautiful, talented woman who had been taken too soon. He would imagine what she might have accomplished if she had lived, what kind of person she might have become. He would also imagine what she might have thought of him, whether she would have been proud of the man he was becoming. When Johnny was 13 years old, his father gave him a guitar. It was a cheap instrument, nothing special, but it would change everything. Johnny threw himself into learning to play, spending hours practicing, developing a style that was uniquely his own. The guitar became his voice, the instrument through which he could express all the emotions that he could not put into words. It became the way he could communicate with his mother, even though she was no longer alive. By the time Johnny reached his late teens, he had become a skilled guitarist, playing in various bands, and developing a reputation as a talented musician. He had also begun to reinvent himself, adopting the stage name Jimi Hendrix, shedding the identity of the poor boy from Seattle and creating something new. But no matter how much he changed on the outside, the wound of his mother's death remained open inside him. Jimi moved to New York in the early 1960s, playing in various bands and gradually building his reputation. He was influenced by the blues legends he admired, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and B.B. King. But he was also pushing the boundaries of what the electric guitar could do. He was creating a sound that was entirely his own, a fusion of blues, rock, and psychedelia that would eventually revolutionize popular music. But success did not come easily. Jimi struggled financially, often living hand to mouth, playing in clubs and bars where the audiences were small and the pay was minimal. He also struggled emotionally, dealing with the weight of his past, the absence of his mother, and the pressure of trying to make it in a competitive and often cruel industry. There were times when he wondered if it was all worth it, if he would ever achieve the success he dreamed of. If you're fascinated by the untold stories behind rock and roll's greatest legends, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most compelling narratives from music history that will change the way you understand your favorite artists. In 1966, Jimi Hendrix's life changed dramatically. He was discovered by Chas Chandler, the bassist for the British rock band The Animals, who recognized something special in the young guitarist. Chandler believed in Jimi's talent and saw the potential for him to become a major star. He convinced Jimi to move to London, where the music scene was vibrant and receptive to new and experimental sounds. London in 1966 was the epicenter of the rock and roll revolution. The Beatles had already conquered the world, and bands like the Rolling Stones, The Who, and Pink Floyd were pushing the boundaries of what rock music could be. It was the perfect place for someone like Jimi, someone who had a vision of what the electric guitar could become and the talent to realize that vision. In London, Jimi formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience with bassist Noel Redding and drummer Mitch Mitchell. The three of them quickly developed a chemistry, creating a sound that was explosive and innovative. They recorded their debut album, Are You Experienced?, which was released in May 1967. The album was an immediate critical and commercial success, featuring songs like Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, and The Wind Cries Mary that would become classics of rock music. But as Jimi's career was taking off, he was also becoming increasingly introspective. Success had not filled the void that his mother's death had left inside him. If anything, it had made him more aware of her absence. He thought about how she would have reacted to his success, whether she would have been proud of him, whether she would have understood the music he was creating. Jimi began to speak more openly about his mother in interviews. He talked about how much he missed her, how her death had shaped him as a person and as an artist. He also began to incorporate references to his mother into his music and his performances. In some ways, his entire artistic project was becoming a way of honoring her memory, of keeping her alive through his art. During this period, Jimi also began to think more deeply about what it meant to be a black artist in a predominantly white industry. His mother had been a victim of systemic racism, and Jimi was acutely aware of the ways that racism had contributed to her suffering and early death. As he became more successful, he became more conscious of his responsibility to use his platform to speak out against injustice and to represent his community. Jimi's transformation from Johnny Allen Hendrix to Jimi Hendrix was not just a change of name or image. It was a spiritual and artistic rebirth. He was shedding the identity of the poor boy from Seattle and becoming something new, a revolutionary artist who would change the course of music history. But he was also carrying his past with him, carrying the memory of his mother, carrying the pain and the love that had shaped him. In the spring of 1967, as Jimi prepared for what would become one of the most important performances of his life, he was consumed by thoughts of his mother. The Monterey Pop Festival was being organized as a benefit concert, and Jimi had been invited to perform. This was his chance to prove himself on a major stage, to show the world what he was capable of. But it was also an opportunity to honor his mother, to acknowledge her presence in his life and in his art. Jimi made a decision that would become one of the most poignant moments in rock and roll history. He decided that he would have a photograph of his mother displayed on stage during his performance. He wanted her to be there with him, even if only in image form. He wanted the world to see the woman who had given him life, the woman who had shaped him in ways that he was only beginning to understand. This incredible journey of Jimi Hendrix is touching hearts everywhere. If you're moved by this story, please like this video and leave a comment below sharing how you think loss and love shape artistic genius. Your feedback inspires us to create more meaningful content. June 18, 1967. The Monterey Pop Festival was in full swing, and the energy in the air was electric. Thousands of people had gathered in the California sunshine to witness what many believed would be the future of music. The festival had already featured performances by some of the biggest names in rock and roll: The Who, Janis Joplin, Otis Redding, The Grateful Dead, and many others. But the energy was building towards something special, something that everyone could feel was about to happen. Backstage, Jimi Hendrix was preparing for his performance. He was dressed in a psychedelic shirt that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light, his hair wild and magnificent, his presence commanding. He was nervous, but it was the good kind of nervous, the kind that comes from knowing that you are about to do something important, something that will be remembered. As Jimi made his final preparations, he looked at the photograph of his mother that had been mounted on a stand to be placed on stage. It was a black and white picture, taken when Lucille was young and vibrant, before life had worn her down. In the photograph, she was smiling, her eyes full of hope and possibility. Jimi studied her face, as if trying to memorize every detail, as if trying to communicate with her across the veil of death. "She's going to be with me," Jimi said to one of the crew members, gesturing toward the photograph. "She's going to see what I can do." The crew member nodded, understanding the significance of what Jimi was saying. This was not just another performance. This was a ritual, a way of honoring the woman who had brought Jimi into the world, the woman who had shaped him in ways that no one else could. When Jimi Hendrix took the stage, the crowd erupted. The energy was palpable, almost tangible. Jimi and the Jimi Hendrix Experience launched into their opening number with explosive energy. The music was unlike anything most of the audience had ever heard. Jimi's guitar seemed to sing, to cry, to speak in a language that transcended words. His fingers moved across the fretboard with a precision and creativity that seemed almost superhuman. But as Jimi performed, his eyes kept drifting to the side of the stage where the photograph of his mother had been placed. There she was, frozen in time, smiling that hopeful smile. With each glance, Jimi felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He was playing for her, he realized. Every note, every bend of the strings, every moment of virtuosity was an offering to the woman who had brought him into this world. The performance was building toward its climax. Jimi had planned to set his guitar on fire during the final moments of his set, a dramatic gesture that would cement his place in rock and roll history. But as he approached that moment, something unexpected happened. As Jimi looked at the photograph of his mother one more time, tears began to stream down his face. The emotion that he had been holding back for so long, the grief, the longing, the love, the regret, came pouring out. For a moment, Jimi's playing faltered. His fingers, usually so precise and controlled, became less certain. The crowd, sensing something profound was happening, fell silent. This was not a performance anymore. This was a moment of genuine human vulnerability, a man confronting his deepest pain in front of thousands of witnesses. Jimi closed his eyes, and the tears continued to flow. He thought about all the years he had spent without his mother, all the milestones she had missed. She had not seen him learn to play guitar. She had not heard his first songs. She had not watched him grow into a man. She had not been there to celebrate his successes or comfort him in his failures. And now, at this moment of triumph, when he was about to perform one of the most important sets of his life, she still could not be there, not in body, only in spirit and in memory. But then something shifted. Jimi opened his eyes, looked at the photograph one more time, and seemed to draw strength from it. He nodded, as if acknowledging his mother's presence, as if receiving her blessing. The tears did not stop, but his playing became even more intense, even more powerful. It was as if the grief itself had become fuel for his music, as if his pain had been transformed into art. When Jimi finally set his guitar on fire, it was not just a dramatic gesture. It was a ritual, a sacrifice, a way of releasing all the emotion that had been building inside him. As the flames consumed the instrument, Jimi watched it burn with an expression of both anguish and liberation. The crowd went wild, but Jimi was somewhere else entirely. He was with his mother, in that space between life and death, between memory and imagination. The performance lasted only about 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When it was over, Jimi walked off the stage, still holding the burning guitar. He was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also exhilarated. He had done it. He had performed one of the greatest rock performances of all time, and he had done it with his mother by his side. This moment changed rock and roll forever. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel to discover more untold stories about the artists who shaped music history. Don't miss a single episode of these powerful narratives. The Monterey Pop Festival performance became legendary almost immediately. The footage was captured on film and later released in the documentary Monterey Pop, which became a classic of music cinema. Jimi's performance was hailed as one of the greatest live rock performances of all time. Critics and fans alike were amazed by his technical skill, his creativity, and the raw emotion he had displayed on stage. The performance launched Jimi Hendrix into superstardom. Within weeks, he was being hailed as a revolutionary artist, a musician who had fundamentally changed what was possible with the electric guitar. Record labels were competing to sign him, promoters were offering him lucrative deals, and fans around the world were clamoring to see him perform. But what many people did not know was the deeper significance of that performance. They did not know about the photograph of Lucille, or about the tears that Jimi had shed while looking at it. They did not know that Jimi had been performing not just for the crowd, but for his mother, for the woman who had shaped him in ways he was only beginning to understand. In the months and years that followed, Jimi would continue to reference his mother in his music and in his interviews. He would speak about how much he missed her, how much he wished she could have seen what he had accomplished. He would also speak about how her absence had driven him to create, to push himself to be the best musician he could be. In a way, his mother's death had been the catalyst for his art. Jimi's career continued to soar. He released album after album, each one more innovative and groundbreaking than the last. Axis, Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland, and Band of Gypsies became classics of rock music, studied and celebrated by musicians and fans around the world. Jimi performed for millions of people, headlined the biggest festivals, and became one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. But success came with a price. The pressure of fame, the constant demands on his time and energy, and the weight of his past all took their toll on Jimi. He struggled with drug addiction, depression, and the sense that he could never quite live up to the expectations that had been placed on him. He also continued to struggle with the unresolved grief over his mother's death. In interviews from this period, Jimi would often speak about his mother with a mixture of love and sadness. He would talk about how he wished she could have seen what he had become, how he wished he could have had more time with her. He would also speak about how her memory continued to inspire him, how the thought of her pushed him to create music that was meaningful and authentic. One of the most poignant moments came in 1968, when Jimi was interviewed by a journalist who asked him about his mother. Jimi became visibly emotional, tears streaming down his face as he talked about her. He spoke about how much he missed her, how he thought about her every day, how he wished he could tell her that he loved her, that he was grateful for the life she had given him. "I think about her all the time," Jimi said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I wonder what she would think of the music I'm making, whether she would be proud of me. I wish I could tell her that I made it, that I became something, that I didn't waste the gift of life that she gave me." The photograph that had been displayed on stage at Monterey became a symbol of something larger: the power of love and loss, the way that grief can be transformed into art, the way that the dead can continue to influence the living. Jimi had shown the world that vulnerability was not weakness, that emotion was not something to be hidden or suppressed, but something to be channeled into creativity and expression. Other musicians began to speak about how Jimi's openness about his mother had influenced them. They talked about how his willingness to be vulnerable, to show his pain, had given them permission to do the same. Jimi had broken down barriers, had shown that it was possible to be a rock and roll star and still be deeply human, still be capable of profound emotion and vulnerability. The legacy of that moment at Monterey extended far beyond Jimi himself. It influenced how musicians thought about their craft, how they approached their performances, how they understood the relationship between personal experience and artistic expression. It showed that the most powerful art often comes from the deepest pain, that the most authentic performances are those in which the artist is willing to be completely vulnerable. The story of Jimi Hendrix and his mother is a testament to the power of love and loss. If this narrative has moved you, please like this video and comment below with your own stories about how loss has shaped your life or inspired your creativity. Your stories matter. In 1970, just 3 years after the Monterey Pop Festival, Jimi Hendrix died at the age of 27. The circumstances of his death were tragic and somewhat mysterious, involving a drug overdose and asphyxiation. He had achieved more in his short life than most people achieve in a lifetime, but he had also struggled with the demons that often accompany genius: addiction, depression, and the weight of expectation. Some have speculated that Jimi's early death was connected to his unresolved grief over his mother. The pain that had fueled his art may have also contributed to his self-destructive behavior. He had never fully come to terms with her absence, had never found a way to truly heal from the wound of losing her so young. Instead, he had channeled that pain into his music, creating some of the most beautiful and powerful art the world has ever known. But perhaps that is the nature of genius, that it often comes from pain, that the greatest artists are often those who have suffered the most deeply. Jimi Hendrix was no exception. His mother's death had shaped him, had driven him, had given him the emotional depth and authenticity that made his music so powerful. In the decades since his death, Jimi Hendrix has become a legend, a figure whose influence extends far beyond music. He is studied in universities, his recordings are analyzed by musicologists, his life is the subject of documentaries and biographies. But perhaps the most important legacy he left behind is the example he set of how to transform pain into beauty, how to honor those we have lost by living fully and creating boldly. The photograph of Lucille that was displayed on stage at Monterey is now part of rock and roll history. It has been reproduced in countless books and articles, has been discussed by music historians and critics, has become an iconic image that represents a moment when a son publicly acknowledged his mother, when he allowed his grief to be seen by thousands of people. That photograph represents the power of love that transcends death, the way that those we have lost continue to shape us, to inspire us, to drive us forward. It represents the idea that we are never truly alone, that the people we love remain with us even after they are gone, living on in our memories, in our creations, in the legacy we build in their honor. Jimi Hendrix shed tears on that stage at Monterey. Tears for his mother. Tears for all the years they did not have together. Tears for the love that could never be fully expressed. But in those tears, in that moment of vulnerability, he created something eternal. He showed the world that grief and love are inseparable, that the deepest pain can produce the most beautiful art, and that the people we have lost never truly leave us. Today, more than 50 years after his death, Jimi Hendrix is remembered as one of the greatest musicians who ever lived. His influence can be heard in countless artists who came after him, in the way that modern musicians approach the electric guitar, in the way that they think about the possibilities of rock music. But perhaps his greatest legacy is not just his music, but the example he set of how to transform pain into beauty, how to honor those we have lost by living fully and creating boldly. The story of Jimi Hendrix and his mother is ultimately a story about the human capacity to transform suffering into meaning, to take the worst that life has to offer and turn it into something transcendent. It is a reminder that behind every great artist, every great achievement, there is often a story of loss and longing, of love that was cut short but never forgotten. It is also a reminder of the importance of honoring those we have lost, of keeping their memory alive, of acknowledging their influence on our lives. Jimi did this by including his mother's photograph on stage at Monterey, by speaking openly about his grief, by channeling his pain into his art. In doing so, he showed us all how to grieve, how to love, how to create meaning from loss. The tears that Jimi shed when he saw his mother's photograph on stage were not just tears of sadness. They were also tears of gratitude, tears of love, tears of recognition. They were the tears of a son honoring his mother, of an artist acknowledging the source of his inspiration, of a human being confronting the deepest truths of existence, that we are all connected, that love transcends death, and that the people we have lost remain with us always. In the end, Jimi Hendrix's greatest achievement was not just the music he created, but the way he lived, the way he loved, the way he honored those who had come before him. He showed us that it is possible to be vulnerable and strong at the same time, that it is possible to grieve and create at the same time, that it is possible to honor the past while building the future. The photograph of Lucille Hendrix, displayed on stage at the Monterey Pop Festival on June 18, 1967, remains a powerful symbol of the enduring bond between mother and son, of the way that love transcends death, of the power of art to express what words alone cannot capture. It is a reminder that we are all shaped by those who came before us, that we carry their memory with us always, and that the greatest tribute we can pay to those we have lost is to live fully, to create boldly, and to love deeply. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through Jimi Hendrix's life and his profound connection to his mother. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible narratives about the legends who shaped music history. Like this video, comment your thoughts about how we can honor those we've lost, and share this story with others who appreciate the deeper stories behind the music. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that celebrates the human stories behind the greatest artists of all time.